The book of Revelation says, "The spirit of prophecy is the testimony of Jesus Christ." This is at the very heart of FirstAmendmentRadio.com. In that spirit, we have created the Prophecy Reality News app for all of your mobile devices, streaming First Amendment Radio 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Available for your Apple, Android device, and smartphone, absolutely free. Get the Prophecy Reality News app installed today, so you can listen to First Amendment Radio wherever you are. The Prophecy Reality News app. Get it now.
Good morning. Welcome to another edition of Inquisition Update. My name's Tom Fress, and I'll be your host for the next hour. You're listening to FirstAmendmentRadio.com. Thanks for tuning in, everybody, and God bless First Amendment Radio. The truth. You come here because you love the truth, and you get the truth. And it's my obligation as a servant of Jesus Christ to make sure that I tell the truth.
We're going to continue now in the book, the very valuable and revealing book entitled Rulers of Evil, Useful Knowledge About Governing Bodies by F. Tupper Saucy. This information should be known by God's people, and it's my pleasure and my blessing to get to help inform God's people about truths never discussed. F. Tupper Saucy, a French Protestant, a Huguenot, a survivor of the Bartholomew's Day massacre. His family, his ancestors, fled the persecution, and he wound up living in the United States unaware of his heritage. And he was informed about his heritage by a Jesuit priest, and who was and also a prosecutor in his trial, his bogus trial, trumped-up trial, alleged tax evasion, and rather than go to prison, F. Tupper Saucy fled and began 10 years of research. And the product of that research is this book, Rulers of Evil. And Chapter 1 of the book is entitled Subliminal Rome. Yes, it begins with a quote here. It says, "The Roman Catholic Church is a state." That was a quote by Bishop Mandel Creighton in his book, Letters. The Roman Catholic Church is a state. And that's true. The Roman Catholic Church is the union, the hermetic union of church and state. And that's the system by which the papacy has always been most effective in destroying God's people. Now, beginning with the text, it says, when a Pulitzer Prize-winning reporter announced in his 1992 Time magazine cover story that a quote-unquote conspiracy binding President Ronald Reagan and John Paul II into a secret holy alliance, a quote-unquote secret holy alliance, had brought about the demise of communism, at least one reader saw through the hype. Professor Carl A. Brown of the University of Massachusetts fired off a letter to Time editors saying, quote, "Last week I taught my students about the separation of church and state. This week I learned that the Pope is running U.S. foreign policy. No wonder our young people are cynical about American ideals," unquote. Did you catch the significance of that quote? Yes, we're taught about the First Amendment separation clause. Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion, nor interfering with the free exercise thereof. And here we have the President of the United States forming a holy alliance with the Pope to destroy the Soviet Union, communism. And this author, who was a teacher, who wrote this letter to the journalist, said, I've been teaching my children about the separation of church and state, and here I learned the Pope's running our foreign policy in this country. The point is well made. Ronald Reagan tore down the wall of separation between church and state in this country. Ronald Reagan, in 1984, established formal diplomatic relations with the Vatican after they were severed when it was discovered that the Jesuits were responsible for the assassination of Abraham Lincoln in 1865. John Surratt, the one who led and organized and choreographed the assassination of Abraham Lincoln, was found to be serving in the Pope's Guard. That's where they found him. It was a Jesuit plot to destroy Abraham Lincoln. Now, I don't care what you think of Abraham Lincoln, whether he was a good president or bad. I don't care if your sympathies lie with the South or the North. The fact of the matter is, the Jesuits killed our president. And they used John Surratt to do it. And when it was discovered, this country severed our relationships with the Vatican. The Vatican was an enemy of this country from that point on. And Ronald Reagan, unbeknownst to the American people, reestablished formal diplomatic relations with the Vatican. Ronald Reagan, a 33rd degree Freemason. Ronald Reagan, an Irish Roman Catholic, despite his professions of Protestantism, fell into league with the biblical Antichrist, Pope John Paul II, in a common effort to destroy communism, but when in fact what he really did was he gave the Pope control of our country, our foreign policy, and our government. Ronald Reagan, when God rewinds the tape and shows the American people what happened in this country, Ronald Reagan will be heralded as one of the greatest traitors this country has ever known, and I voted for him twice. I voted for Ronald Reagan twice. And I want God to forgive my sin and to wipe my slate clean and remove that fact from my memory. He continues. He said, what Brown had learned from Carl Bernstein, I discovered for myself over several years of private investigation. The papacy really does run United States foreign policy and always has. Yes, Bernstein noted that the leading American players behind the Reagan-Vatican conspiracy to a man were devout Roman Catholics, namely William Casey, director of the CIA. Now, I can tell you, William Casey was a Knight of Malta. And Alexander Haig, Secretary of State, also a Knight of Malta. Richard Allen, National Security Advisor. Vernon Walters, Ambassador at Large. Judge William Clark, National Security Advisor. And William Wilson, Ambassador to the Vatican State. Bernstein noted that the leading American players behind the Reagan-Vatican conspiracy to a man were devout Roman Catholics, and you've got their names. It says, but the reporter neglected to mention that the entire Senate Foreign Relations Committee was governed by Roman Catholics as well. Specifically, Senators Joseph Biden. Does that same name sound familiar? He's now the vice president. Recipient of 2 honorary Jesuit degrees. Joe Biden, a devout Roman Catholic, a devout papist whose first loyalty is to his little God in Rome, is now the vice president of this country. John F. Kerry, Terrorism, Narcotics, and International Communications, Paul Sarbanes, International Economic Policy, Trade, Oceans, and Environment, and Daniel Patrick Moynihan, Near Eastern and South Asian Affairs, and Christopher Dodd, Western Hemisphere and Peace Corps Affairs. And you know these same people that I just mentioned? They're also creating your new health care plan. You suppose they might be just as loyal to the Pope today as they were then? He continues, he said, Bernstein would have been wandering off point to list the Roman Catholic leaders of American domestic policy, such as Majority Leader George Mitchell and Speaker of the House Tom Foley. In fact, when the Holy Alliance story hit the stands, there was virtually no arena of federal legislative activity, according to the 1992 World Almanac of U.S. Politics, that was not directly controlled by a Roman Catholic senator or representative. Listen to this again. When the Holy Alliance story hit the stands, there was virtually no arena of federal legislative activity that was not directly controlled by a Roman Catholic senator or representative. The committees and subcommittees of the United States Senate and House of Representatives governing commerce. Listen to this. This is an extremely long list. I hope I don't bore you. But listen to this list. This is the list of the government functions that were directly controlled by Roman Catholics. Commerce, communications and telecommunications, energy, medicine, health, education and welfare, human services, consumer protection, finance and financial institutions, transportation, labor and unemployment, hazardous materials, taxation, bank regulation, currency and monetary policy, oversight of the Federal Reserve System. Oversight of the Federal Reserve System is controlled by Catholics. Imagine that. You talk about the fox watching the henhouse. And I'm just getting started. The list is going to continue here. Don't go to sleep. Commodity prices, rent services, small business administration, urban affairs, European affairs, Near Eastern and South Asian affairs, terrorism, narcotics, international communications, international economic trade, oceans, environment policy, insurance, housing, community development, federal loan guarantees, economic stabilization measures, including wage and price controls, gold and precious metal transactions, agriculture, animal and forest industries, rural issues, nutrition, price supports, food for peace, agricultural exports, soil conservation, irrigation, stream channelization, flood control, minority enterprise, environment and pollution, appropriations, defense, foreign operations, vaccines, drug labeling and packaging, drug and alcohol abuse, inspection and certification of fish and processed foods, use of vitamins and saccharin, national health insurance proposals, human services, legal services, family relations, the arts and humanities, the handicapped, the aging. In other words, virtually every aspect of secular life in America came under the headship of one of these Roman Catholic laypersons. Listen to the names of the Roman Catholics who control our government at the time of the writing of this book. Frank Annunzio, Joseph Biden, Silvio Conti, Kika de la Garza, John Dingell, Christopher Dodd, Vic Fazio, James Florio, Henry Gonzalez, Tom Harkin from Iowa, Roman Catholic Tom Harkin from Iowa, my home state, Edward Kennedy, John Kerry, John LaFalk, Patrick Leahy, Charles Lucan, Edward Madigan, Edward Markey, Joseph McDade, Barbara Mikulski, George Miller, Daniel Patrick Moynihan, John Murtha, Mary Rose Oker, David Obey, Claiborne Pell, Charlie Rangel, Dan Rostenkowski, and Edward Roybal. Do you think we ought to pay just a little bit more attention in this country as to how many more Catholics are in our government today in high office, controlling every aspect of our government? Do you think it's a concern that we ought to be paying attention to? Americans need to be awakened to this. It says Vatican Council II's Constitution on the Church in 1964 instructs politicians to use their... Listen to this. The Vatican Council II's Constitution on the Church in 1964 instructs politicians to use their secular offices, their political offices, to advance the cause of Roman Catholicism. Catholic laypersons, quote, wherever they are called upon to expend all their energy for the growth of the Church and its continuous sanctification, and to make the Church present and operative in those places and circumstances where only through them it can become the salt of the earth. Vatican Council II, the Ecumenical Council, where they throw the Protestants a bone and say, well, we're not going to call you heretics to be burned at the stake anymore. We'll charitably call you separated brethren. Yeah, that's the ticket. That'll do it. And while, on the other hand, they're telling the Catholics, get into political office, work to make America Catholic, do all you can to bring America to the feet of the Pope. While we've got the Protestants passive, we've got the Protestants pacified, we've infiltrated their churches with Freemasonry, we've taught them false doctrine, we've taught them this ecumenical movement to reunite with the Roman Catholic Church, and they're following the little Pied Pipers back to the Roman Catholic Church. We want you Roman Catholics in government to take control of the government and to bring it to the Roman Catholic Church. Time's running out. Christ is about to return. Our plans are going to be foiled, but we've got to rule the world. Do you understand what's happening in this country? Vatican Council II further instructs all Catholics, quote, by their competence in secular disciplines and by their activities to vigorously contribute their efforts so that the goods of this world may be more equitably distributed among all men. You see your goods leaving the country? You see your industries producing the goods of this nation being taken out of this country, this Protestant nation, and put into third world countries to redistribute the wealth? Do you see the Council on Foreign Relations passing laws to allow the wealth-generating industries and good-paying jobs to be taken out of this country? It's called wealth redistribution, and it's the Vatican responsible for it. This is following the decree of the Pope. He said, the goods of this world may be more equitably distributed among all men and may in their own way be conducive to universal, that is Roman Catholic progress. You remember, universal and Catholic go together, are interchangeable words. More conducive to universal progress in human and Christian freedom. Freedom. I love the way they use the word freedom. They throw it around like it's a piece of jewelry. In fact, what it means is slavery. And it continues, it says, and to remedy the customs and conditions of the world, if they are an inducement to sin, so that they may all be conformed to the norms of justice and may favor the practice of virtue rather than to hinder it. So that's the mission of every Catholic. That's the mission of every Catholic in our government, to redistribute the wealth, to use their offices to favor the Roman Catholic Church and to literally take control of this country. It's not a secret. You just don't know about it. Nobody's taught you. Your Protestant pastor didn't teach you. He didn't read this book. And if you suggest that he read this book, maybe he'll refuse to do it because he's ecumenical. He wants to reunite with the Roman Catholic Church. He thinks it's important that all of Christianity be reunited with the Antichrist. We are in big trouble in this country. Vatican Council II affirms Catholic doctrine dating back to 1302 when Boniface VIII, Pope Boniface VIII, asserted that it is absolutely necessary for the salvation of every human creature to be subject to the Roman Pontiff, the Pope, the Antichrist. That's what Vatican Council II confirmed. A reiteration of a decree by Pope Boniface VIII, Antichrist Boniface VIII, that it is absolutely necessary for the salvation of every human creature to be subject to the Roman Catholic Pope. This was the inspiration for the papacy to create the United States of America that materialized in 1776 by a process just as secret as the Reagan-Vatican production of Eastern Europe in 1989. What? American government Roman Catholic from the beginning? That's what this author asserts. And he's going to give us information that's going to make it pretty darn difficult for us to deny it. I've read this book already. And it shook the foundations of my belief, my understanding of the history of the founding of this nation. And you need to know about it. And that's why I'm reading this book on the air. Now he says, consider the land known today as the District of Columbia. It bore the name Rome in 1663 in the property records. And the branch of the Potomac River that bordered, quote-unquote, Rome, which is now Washington, D.C., on the south, was called the Tiber. And I'll just add that the man who owned the village Rome, which is now Washington, D.C., which was situated on a tributary of the Potomac River known as the Tiber, his name was Pope. You talk about Kabbalah. If you're a Freemason, you come to this country and you find a little village, you're a Jesuitized, Illuminatized Freemason, and you come to this country and you find a little village on a tributary, a little village named Rome, on a tributary named the Tiber, and owned by a man named Pope, what are you naturally going to think? If you're a Kabbalist, a Freemason, an Illuminized Freemason, a Jesuitized Freemason, you're going to think this is going to be the capital city of the country. We need to harness all this Kabbalah. We need to harness all this astral power. And that's exactly what happened. It says this information was reported in the 1902 edition of the Catholic Encyclopedia's article on Daniel Carroll. The article specifically declared itself of interest to Catholics in the 1902 edition. It was deleted from the new Catholic Encyclopedia of 1967. Wonder why they thought it necessary to delete that. Maybe it was waking up too many people, right? Other facts were reported in 1902 and deleted from 1967. For example, when Congress met in Washington for the first time in November of 1800, quote, the only two really comfortable and imposing houses within the bounds of the city belonged to Roman Catholics. One was Washington's first mayor, Robert Brent. The other was Brent's brother-in-law, Notley Young, a Jesuit priest. And trust me, we're just getting started. This book is an eye-opener like you wouldn't believe, and I hope you tune in. Tell your friends and family to listen to this broadcast and learn the truth that nobody will tell you. Stay tuned for a short message, and we'll be right back.
The program you are listening to is 100% sponsored by you, the listener, on this First Amendment Rights Media channel. You will notice that there are few commercials on this radio network. There's a good reason for that. Corporate advertising dollars come with strings that limit program content. So without your help, these programs cannot continue on internet or our several affiliates. If you benefit by the educational law programs, we ask you to give. If you are admonished or nurtured by the Bible and ministry programs, we ask you to give. If some voice a cause that you are passionate about, we ask you to give. If you believe in any of these, we ask you to support them as you would a missionary on a continual basis, as if giving a tithe for missionary radio. These programs are not commercially viable and must be supported by those faithful to the cause of truth. Look for the button to sponsor your favorite programs at our listen and schedule pages on the internet. Then, when you subscribe, we will send you the last quarterly MP3 CD of that program immediately, and continue to do so with each new quarter. We will also give you unlimited archive access to all of our programs. We're asking you to give much less than a tithe, so that you may also send support directly to a particular program host, cause, and anywhere else the Spirit may lead you. Do all to the glory of our God and Creator, for His holy nation, the only kingdom that will last forever. Thank you for listening.
Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. That's crosstheborder.org.
I know you all want answers, and believe me, so do I, and I'll do my best to get them.
Despite Nicolas Cage's promise to do his best to get left behind rapture answers for us, don't hold your breath. Not everyone believes Left Behind is true prophecy. Some may even regard as conspiratorial the mainstream re-release of the Left Behind movie with actor Nicolas Cage portraying the main character as an attempt to further reinforce in the minds of all this perception of false prophecy in order to condition the masses for the play about to begin. If you want true Bible prophecy answers, get the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. The author exposes the Latin rapture origin, the 7-year tribulation deception, true Bible revelation of Daniel's 70 weeks, the abomination of desolation, the restrainer, America in the Revelation, the image of the beast and the mark of the beast, and the truth about God's chosen people, and so much more about Bible prophecy. This book will shatter the Left Behind paradigm of future events. Get the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. That's crosstheborder.org.
Okay, welcome back to the second half hour of Inquisition Update. We're continuing the book Rulers of Evil by F. Tupper Saucy, an extremely interesting book and informative, educational, and I highly suggest that if you can get a copy of this book, please do. It's out of print currently, and I got my copy on eBay, and there is one seller on eBay that is selling brand new copies of this book for $20. Now that's a bargain. $20 for this book. And this book, this particular book, Rulers of Evil by F. Tupper Saucy, and the book The Grand Design Exposed by John Daniel are together a very good understanding of what really happened during the founding of this country. And it's something we all need to be aware of. Now, if you're listening to this broadcast on the live feed and you think the information in this book is valuable, tell somebody. Tell your friends and family. Tell them to tune in later this afternoon at 6 p.m. Central, 7 Eastern, and they can listen to a live re-airing of this program. And the more listeners we have, the sooner this information will come into the hands of God's people. Help spread the word. Don't keep this information to yourself. Okay. It says, Daniel Carroll was a Roman Catholic congressman from Maryland. It's not Maryland, it's Maryland. For a reason, it was named after Mary. It was a Catholic country. Baltimore was the first archdiocese in this country. It's a Jesuit haven to this day. It was in Baltimore that the Jesuits made their first assassination attempt on Abraham Lincoln when he went through town on his way to swear in Washington, D.C. as president. Maryland is a Jesuit stronghold. It says Daniel Carroll was a Roman Catholic congressman from Maryland who signed two of America's foundational fundamental documents, the Articles of Confederation of the United States and the United States Constitution. Carroll was a direct descendant of the Calverts, a Catholic family to whom Charles I of England had granted Maryland as a feudal barony. Carroll had received his education at St. Omer's Jesuit College in Flanders, where young English-speaking Catholics were trained in a variety of guerrilla techniques for advancing the cause of Roman Catholicism among the hostile Protestants. So typical to Jesuit training, he was a guerrilla. He was not a priest, as are the Jesuits. They are warriors for the Pope. The Roman Catholic Church is called the Church Militant for a reason. Conquest. Not persuasion, not by the leading and teaching of the Holy Spirit, but by power, by might, by coercion, by infiltration, by guerrilla tactics, by political overthrow and political intrigue, by every and any means, because the end justifies the means. To make the world Catholic is the goal of the Jesuit order. Okay? It says in 1790, President George Washington, a so-called Protestant, the author calls him Protestant, but I'm beginning to wonder now, President George Washington, a Protestant, appointed Congressman Carroll to head a commission of 3 men to select land for the federal city called for in the Constitution. Of all places, the commission chose Rome, which at the time consisted of 4 farms, one of which belonged to Daniel Carroll. It was upon Carroll's farm that the new government chose to erect its most important building, the Capitol. That's right, the Capitol now stands on land that was originally owned by the Roman Catholic Carroll family, Daniel Carroll specifically. One of the 4 farms in this little burg known as Rome on the Tiber, owned by a Roman Catholic Jesuit, Daniel Carroll, and is now the dwelling place of the capital of our country. It says the American capital abounds with clues of its Roman origins. Freedom, the Roman goddess whose statue crowns the dome of the Capitol building, was created in Rome at the studio of American sculptor Thomas Crawford. We find a whole pantheon of Roman deities in the great fresco covering the dome's interior rotunda. Persephone, Ceres, Freedom, Vulcan, Mercury, even a deified George Washington. These figures were the creation of Vatican artist Constantino Brumidi. Interesting facts, isn't it? Has anybody ever told you this before? It says the fact that the National State House evolved as a capital bespeaks Roman influence. No building can rightly be called a capital unless it's a temple of Jupiter, the great father god of Rome, who ruled heaven with his thunderbolts and nourished the earth with his fertilizing rains. If it was a Capitolium, it belonged to Jupiter and his priests. So the very word that they used to describe the seat of government in this country is called a capital after the ancient Roman Capitoliums. They were temples to the worship of Jupiter. Jupiter's mascot was the eagle, which the Founding Fathers made their mascot as well. A Roman eagle tops the governing idol of the House of Representatives, a 46-inch sterling silver and ebony wand called a mace. The mace is, quote, the symbol of authority of the House, unquote. When the sergeant-at-arms displays it before an unruly member of Congress, the mace restores order. Its position at the rostrum tells whether the House is in committee or in session. So there, we have an icon used as an order of discipline and an order of order. An icon which has its derivatives in ancient Roman paganism, topped with an eagle. Also a Roman icon. America's motto, Annuit Coeptis, which we find on our money, came from a prayer to Jupiter. It appeared in Book 9 of Vigil's epic propaganda, the Aeneid, a poem commissioned just before the birth of Christ by Caius Maecenas, the multi-billionaire power behind Augustus Caesar. The poem's objective was to fashion Rome into an imperial monarchy for which its citizens would gladly sacrifice their lives. Fascism may be an ugly word to many, but its stately emblem is apparently offensive to no one. The emblem of fascism, a pair of them, commands the wall above and behind the Speaker's rostrum in the chamber of the House of Representatives. Now, let me stop. The next time you're watching C-SPAN and the camera is live in debate in the House of Representatives, look just behind the Speaker's chair, and on the wall on either side are fasci, two distinctly Roman symbols, distinctly Roman icons called the fasci, the fasci. He says they are called fasces And I can think of no reason for them to be there other than to declare the fascist nature of American Republican democracy. A fasces is a Roman device. Actually, it originated with the ancient Etruscans, from whom the earliest Romans derived their religious jurisprudence nearly 3,000 years ago. It's an axe head whose handle is a bundle of rods tightly strapped together by a red sinew. It symbolizes the ordering of priestly functions into a single infallible sovereign, an autocrat, who could require life and limb of his subjects. If the fasces is entwined with laurel, like the pear on the house wall, it signifies Caesarian military power. That is, the military power of the Caesars of Rome. The Romans called this infallible sovereign Pontifex Maximus, the supreme bridge builder. Pontifex Maximus, the supreme bridge builder. No Roman was called Pontifex Maximus until the title was given to Julius Caesar in 48 BC. Today's Pontifex Maximus is Pope John Paul II at the time of the writing of this book. That's right, the popes are the successors of the Caesars. They are both the bishops of the church, and they are also the temporal power of the Caesars. Remember, when we started out, we were talking about the union of church and state. The Pope's not just an ecclesiastical dictator in the world. He is a temporal dictator, too. Continuing in succession, the Caesars as well as the quote-unquote apostolic succession. Both are lies. Both are contraventions of man. But nonetheless, the world believes that the Pope of Rome is not only the spiritual leader of the world, but he is also the temporal or governmental leader of the world. That's the New World Order, people. That's what the New World Order is. And our government, as given to us yesterday by Bill Hughes, makes it absolutely clear in the Scripture that this is true. Bible prophecy, Revelation chapter 13. And it is the United States that is making a global image of the Holy Roman Empire of old. They call it new, but it's not new at all. It's just screwing the clock back about 1,500 years. And it's happening right before our very eyes. And most people haven't a clue what is going on or who's behind it. He continues, he says, as well discovered in the forthcoming chapter, Pope John Paul II does not hold that title alone. He shares it with a mysterious partner, a military man, a man holding an office that has been known for more than 4 centuries as Papa Nero, the Black Pope. I shall present evidence that the House Fasces represent the Black Pope, who indeed rules this world. Later, I will develop what is sure to become a controversial hypothesis, that the Black Pope rules by divine appointment and for the ultimate good of mankind. This is an unbelievable book. Chapter 2 of the book is entitled Missionary Adaptation. He says, few people seem to be aware that the Roman Catholic Church in America is officially recognized as a state. How this came about makes interesting reading. Early in his administration, President Ronald Reagan invited the Vatican City, whose ruling head is the Pope, to open its first embassy in Washington, D.C. His Holiness the Pope responded positively, and the Assembly, or the Apostolic Nunciature of the Holy See, opened officially on January 10, 1984. Shortly thereafter, a complaint was filed against President Ronald Reagan in the U.S. District Court in Philadelphia by the American Jewish Congress, the Baptist Joint Committee on Public Affairs, Seventh-day Adventists, the National Council of Churches, the National Association of Evangelicals, and Americans United for Separation of Church and State. The plaintiffs sought to have the court declare that the administration had unconstitutionally granted to the Roman Catholic faith privileges that were being denied to other established religions. On May 7th, let me correct myself. They protested privileges granted to the Roman Catholic faith that were being denied to other establishments of religion. Now, that's using words directly from the Constitution in the Separation Clause. And I hope I didn't confuse anyone. It says on May 7th, 1985, the suit was thrown out by Chief Judge John Fulham. Judge Fulham ruled that district courts could not have jurisdiction to intervene in foreign policy decisions of the executive branch. Bishop James W. Malone, president of the U.S. Catholic Congress, praised Judge Fulham's decision, naturally, noting that it settled not a religious issue but a public policy question. The plaintiffs appealed. The Third Circuit denied the appeal, noticing that the Roman Catholic Church's unique position of control over a sovereign territory gives it advantages that other religious organizations do not enjoy, unquote. The Apostolic Nunciature at 3339, interesting numbers, 3339 Massachusetts Avenue Northwest, enables Pontifex Maximus to supervise more closely American civil government, public policy, as administered through Roman Catholic laypersons. One such layperson was Chief Judge Fulham, whose Roman Catholicism apparently escaped the attention of the plaintiffs. So now you have a Roman Catholic judge striking down a complaint by non-Catholic religious sects in this country, declaring that an establishment of a papal nunciature in this country was a violation of the Separation Clause of our Constitution. Now, what American who knows anything about the Separation Clause wouldn't agree with him? And you would have expected that any court in the land would have seen the establishment of a papal nunciature in this country as being a violation of the Separation Clause. But the trouble was, the judge was Roman Catholic. And as we learned, in response to Boniface VIII, he was using his secular position to foster the benefits of the Roman Catholic Church in this country. And America has grown silent. We've accepted this papal nunciature. We've accepted its oversight of our government. And who do you think the Apostolic Nunciature reports to? The Vatican. They control our government. It's not a wild, wide-eyed conspiracy theory claim. It's a fact. He says this same imperium ran pagan Rome in essentially the same way. The public servants were priests of the various gods and goddesses. Monetary affairs, for example, were governed by the priests of the goddess Moneta. Priests of Dionysus managed architecture and cemeteries, while priests of Justitia, with her sword, and Libera, blindfolded, holding her scales aloft, ruled the courts. Hundreds of priestly orders known as the Sacred College managed hundreds of government bureaus, from the justice system to the construction, cleaning, and repair of bridges. No bridge could be built without the approval of the Pontifex Maximus, the bridge builder, remember. Buildings, temples, castles, baths, sewers, ports, highways, walls, and ramparts of the city and the boundaries of the land. Priests directed the paving and repairing of streets and roads, supervised the calendar and the education of youth. Priests regulated weights, measures, and the value of money. Priests solemnized and certified births, baptisms, puberty, purification, confession, adolescence, marriage, divorce, death, burial, excommunication, canonization, deification, adoption into families, adoption into tribes and orders of nobility. Priests ran the libraries, the museums, the consecrated lands and treasures. Priests registered the trademarks and symbols. Priests were in the charge of the public worship, directing festivals, plays, entertainments, games, ceremonies. Priests wrote and held custody over wills, testaments, and legal conveyances. Doesn't it sound like the list I read earlier? Yes, all these Roman Catholics that I read earlier in this list that control virtually every aspect of our government. Our government is a mirror image of the Roman government. We call them elected officials, but that little Caesar in Rome probably calls them priests. Don't you imagine? They serve him. They don't serve you and me. They're priests of their little god in Rome. Most of them are outwardly Catholic. Make no bones about being Catholic. The rest of them are ecumenical Protestants in name only, uniting with the Roman Catholic cult. What hope is there in this country for God's true people? We simply have to comprehend that our government is controlled by the Vatican. It's not a wide-eyed conspiracy theory. There's so much evidence to support it that it's ludicrous to avert one's eyes from this obvious control of Rome, of our government. It says by the 4th century, 1/2 of the lands and 1/4 of the population of the Roman Empire were owned by the priests. When the Emperor Constantine and his Senate formally adopted Christianity as the empire's official religion, the exercise was more of a merger or acquiescence than a revolution. An acquisition more than a revolution. The wealth of the priests merely became the immediate possession of the Christian churches, and the priests merely declared themselves Christians. Government continued without interruption. The pagan gods and goddesses were artfully outfitted with names appropriate to Christianity. The sign over the pantheon indicating to the fertility goddess Cybele and all the gods was rewritten to Mary and all the saints. The temple of Apollo became the church of Saint Apollinaris. The temple of Mars was consecrated Church of Santa Martina, with the inscription, Mars hence ejected, Martina martyred made. Claims now the worship which to him was paid. So they just Christianized all the pagan iconography in Rome. They just gave them Christian names. Nothing changed but the names. Hallowed icons of Apollo were identified as Jesus, and the crosses of Bacchus and Tammuz were accepted as the official symbol of the crucifixion. Pope Leo I decreed that St. Peter and St. Paul have replaced Romulus and Remus as Rome's protecting patrons. Pagan feasts, too, were Christianized. December 25th, the celebration of the birth of a number of gods, among them Saturn, Jupiter, Tammuz, Bacchus, Osiris, and Mithras was claimed to have been that of Jesus as well, and the traditional Saturnalia season of drunken merriment and gift-giving evolved to what we now know today as Christmas. Are we to continue in this blasphemous paganism and calling it Christianity? Not with God's blessings, and His hand of blessing is being removed as we speak. And while I've run out of time, we'll return to this tomorrow on the broadcast. You're listening to Inquisition Update on FirstAmendmentRadio.com. Stay tuned for more godly teachings on First Amendment Radio. I'll see you tomorrow.
Since the beginning of time, kings have sought it, nations have fought for it. It has been traded, it has been borrowed, it has been purchased, it has been stolen. There's a reason for it. To secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and to our posterity. Invest with the security of gold and silver. Call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188 or visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net. Listen to Financial Survival with your host Melody Cedarstrom right here on FirstAmendmentRadio.com at 4 p.m. Eastern or 1 p.m. Pacific Time. Visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net or call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188. Toll free 1-800-375-4188.